Welcome to Armchair Expat, the podcast meant to get you out of your lazy boy and into your new life abroad. I'm Shannon Acton, founder of Bargain Homes Abroad, and I'm riding shotgun as we chase the dream of life beyond borders. Each episode, we'll hear stories from people who've left their comfort zone to explore the world. They'll share their highs, their lows, and their in-betweens, all meant to lovingly light a fire under your bum, so you can stop dreaming about it and start living it. So if you're stuck in your comfy recliner, scrolling through dreamy destinations, wondering what if, it's time to swap that raggedy old armchair for a one-way ticket. Let's freaking go, people. Welcome back to Armchair Expat. Today I'm talking with Cepee, the founder of She Hit Refresh. At 35, she sold everything, left Texas, and moved to Spain, and she's been helping other women do the same ever since. She's the author of I'm Outta Here, a visa guide to living in Europe that was featured in Forbes, and the creator of the Move Abroad After 30 Masterclass and the Refreshers Lounge community. As the daughter of immigrants, Cepee knows what it means to carve your own path. In this episode, we talk about what really holds people back, the rise of remote work, and why it's not too late to start over, no matter what your age. Let's jump in. Welcome, Cepee, to the Armchair Expat podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm equally excited to be on, so thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So let's just hop right in and tell us kind of a little bit of your background, where you're originally from. Then we'll go into your story of how you got abroad.
Sure. I think a lot of people are surprised to find out that I am from Houston, Texas. So I'm a Texan. But I was born in West Virginia, but moved to Texas when I was very young. A child of immigrants. My dad is from Iran, and my mom is from Colombia. So I grew up in the suburbs, had a pretty normal childhood out there in Clear Lake, if anyone knows where that is, near NASA. My dad worked at NASA, so lived there.
Give us about a little bit of your early kind of career before moving to abroad and what that looked like, and then we'll go into kind of like how that seed was planted and why you ended up going abroad.
Yeah. So I moved abroad several times throughout my life. I first went to Spain in 2001 when I was 21, fell in love with it. And then throughout from 21 to 35, I tried and failed many times to move abroad. But this most recent time that stuck, that I made it work, I moved in 2015 when I was 35. So I can talk about what I was doing up to that point, work-wise. And I like to say that I was a serial job hopper. So while I studied marketing, and I had jobs related to that after college, a lot of that time, as I mentioned, I had tried to move to Spain many times. A lot of that time was working for a year and then quitting and using my savings to go back to Spain or to travel the world. So for much of my 20s, while I may have worked in sales or marketing, I wasn't really building skills because I wasn't staying anywhere long enough to do that. Mm-hmm. So I would say when I was 30, or a little bit before that, it was a little bit of a wake-up call of like, okay, we need to figure out what we're going to be doing to adults now. And I actually did a master's program in Spain to steer my career in a different direction. I wanted to go towards international relations and work in that capacity. But that didn't work out because I had to move back to Texas. And so before I made this last leap to Spain, I was working at a tech company, but I was working in HR, which was something totally unrelated to my background. But I found myself living in Austin, Texas for circumstances outside of my control, and I just needed a job. And so that's really what I was doing before I moved to Spain. It was working at that tech company was the longest I ever stayed anywhere, so 2.5 years. And I actually really loved that job because up to that point, I really just knew like a 9-to-5 wasn't for me. I just wasn't made for an office and 2 weeks vacation. So when people ask, what was my career before that, there are a lot of gaps there. There are just, a lot of jumping around and quitting. And so I think it's really interesting compared to like where I am now in life.
Yeah. So what do you think attributed to the desire or the wanderlust to move abroad?
That's a great question. I mean, I think from an early age, I really was always chasing freedom. And maybe feeling, just, when you're abroad, you just feel so alive. And so I grew up in a household, with immigrant parents, and my father was very strict. Coming from Iran, there was a lot of things I wasn't able to do, and that was tough. In the '90s, also, I had a lot of friends who were immigrants, but I had a lot of friends who had parents who were immigrants, but I also had, friends who didn't, and they had a lot more freedom than I did, and it was a point of, where I was butting heads a lot with my parents. So I think, I went abroad the first time by myself at 17, and just having that taste of being out in the world on my own. I mean, discovering the world was very intoxicating, but also the freedom to really have autonomy over what I wanted to do and how I was spending my time, and just my choices. I think that was something that I was always chasing.
I love how you use the word intoxicating, because that is really how it is, right? Like
Mhm.
once you're exposed to something, especially travel and moving abroad and going international, it is addictive. It is really, like, for most people.
Yeah, yeah. With addiction, I still have it. I still have that addiction to travel and exploring and discovering.
Did you always know you wanted to move to Spain in particular, or was that just what developed?
Yeah, that's what developed. I mean, I think when we're first on our travels, we kind of fall in love with every place. So I mentioned the first time I went abroad, I was 17, and it's like a miracle that my parents let me go to the Netherlands by myself. I mean, I was going to visit a friend that I had made in high school that had moved back to the Netherlands, and stay with her family. But still, when I went to the Netherlands, I fell in love with it. I was like, I want to move here. This is amazing. It was so different than anything I had experienced in the US, and within the cultures I had been exposed to, Iranian, Colombian. So for me, the Netherlands was very exotic. And I thought I wanted to move there. But every year after that trip, because I had been bitten by the travel bug, I would travel to somewhere new. And so a few years later, when I went to Spain, I really had that Goldilocks moment of, okay, I've seen a few places, but this feels different and this feels right. And I really fell in love with Madrid that one summer I was there, and had tried to chase being able to live there for many years until I was finally able to really do that about 10 years ago.
Can we walk through the process of, and I'm so appreciative of you sharing, like, you tried and failed, and nothing's really a failure, but you've made that attempt a few times, and kind of gone through that. And the last one, what was the process like, and how did you approach it differently than the first couple of times?
Yeah, the first couple times, I mean, the world was really different then in terms of opportunities to untether your life and take work with you. I think work was the biggest challenge, right? How am I going to be able to work and support myself in a foreign country, when, like, you have to get a visa, and that was so hard back then. So I came to Spain. I studied Spanish that first time I came, so that wasn't leading me to work. I came again a few years later in 2006 through a teaching English program that is now referred to as NALCAP. And that was a great program, but it didn't lead to anything else. It was kind of like a dead end, right? Um, I stayed in Spain for a little bit and worked under the table. So that did happen because I was trying to find a company to sponsor me, didn't want to leave the country. And so I overstayed, but eventually had to go back to the US. So these were all shorter stints of like 7 months, 9 months, a year. I came back again. So there's a lot of back and forth. Came back again and did a master's with the hopes of, thinking that I would be more marketable because I had a master's. I would build a network that would maybe open some doors. I would be in Spain to be able to go on interviews. So that was the idea. But 2 months before I graduated, my father passed away unexpectedly. And so that's what took me back to Texas. When I said I had to, I found myself in Austin kind of in a situation outside of my control. That was that I had to go back to Texas for family. Um, and honestly, didn't really think about Spain anymore for a few years because I was just kind of healing. And that dream to live abroad that had been so alive for so many years just became dormant. But to answer your question, in 2015, what was different, when I realized that, oh, wow, yeah, I had this dream to live abroad and I want to try to make that happen again. But I'm 35, I'm not 21 anymore. How do we do this? I came back to teach English because that was a way to get my foot in the door. But I was just so determined to find a way to stay on my terms. And I got lucky. a year after I moved here and I got a work visa sponsorship. But what really changed, when I say the world had changed, is at that point remote work was starting to emerge. It wasn't anything like it was now, but it was a possibility, and people were doing that in a way that wasn't even a thought, 10 years prior when I was trying to move here. And so shortly after I moved to Spain in 2015, I found myself in remote work, and that opened up a lot of doors in terms of being able to support myself. Um, with a salary that was adequate to the lifestyle I wanted to live, because salaries are much lower in Spain. And also, there was a visa I could qualify for that would allow me to stay in Spain and work remotely. So that's how that happened.
Okay. And then it eventually progressed into She Hit Refresh. So how did that all come about too?
Yeah, so there's many parts of the story here. So I got myself to Spain, knew that I would find a way out of teaching. So how did I get from like serial job hopper teaching English to running a business? I do think of myself as an accidental entrepreneur. It wasn't a dream that I had. I mean, I said my father worked at NASA, but he also had his own business that my mother helped run. So my parents were entrepreneurs. I was so anti wanting to run a business. I just didn't want that responsibility. So it wasn't an idea that I had ever. But in finding ways to stay in Spain when I was teaching English in 2015, I started learning or teaching myself social media marketing skills. I started just community building organically because I wanted to meet people. And so building those skills, just, teaching myself those skills, I was able to get into remote work. And with those skills, then, I just realized that, my friends back home were asking me about my move abroad and how I did it. And at the same time, I was meeting so many incredible women in Madrid who had done the thing that I did. And I really thought I wasn't only when I was doing it, moving abroad at 35, quitting your job, like leaving a life you had built up for the unknown. I realized it wasn't so uncommon. So I started a Facebook group to connect these people who wanted to do it, women who had done it. Was not a business idea. It was just like, let's talk and help each other. And from that, a year later, we had over 4,000 people by word of mouth in this Facebook group, and a little light bulb went off in my head, like maybe there's something behind this. And so using those skills that I taught myself in terms of, social media marketing, community building, content creation, that's where I started to start working on She Hit Refresh as a side hustle. I wouldn't even really call it a business at that point, but it was a side hustle for quite a few years. I would say 5 years. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago that I got serious about it and it really became a business.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about She Hit Refresh for people who aren't familiar with it? What are the it started as a free Facebook group, right? And then it's built into so much more. So let's kind of dive into that.
Yeah, yes, yeah, I totally left that out. So She Hit Refresh. So we are a community for women age 30 and over who want to transform their lives by moving abroad. And so what we do is we help educate, support, and connect women, over 30 who want to do this so that they can make their dream come true. Because what I found, in my case and just the women that I work with, and a lot of us feel like this is crazy. Like it's too late. I am too old to be doing this. I should have done this in my 20s, or I should wait till I retire. But for those in-betweeners, there isn't a lot of support or resources out there. And so that's what we do. And how do we do that? We do that in different ways. As you mentioned, we have the free Facebook group, which has over 17,000 people in there, women in there, which is incredible. But we also have, there's only so much we can do in a Facebook group. So other ways that we support women is we have a 4-day masterclass called the Move Abroad After 30 Masterclass. So that's where we educate women on like what they need to do, just the basics. If you've no idea where to start, this masterclass is going to help you get clarity on what it is you want, understand your visa options, understand what can you do for work, the different options you have, and then also work on some mindset. Because I like to say, even when we know what we need to do, we can get in our own way, right? Through our fears. So we help them with that masterclass. And then also one step further for women who don't want to do this alone, who are actively working on their move abroad and need support, we have a membership community for them as well.
And what's involved in the membership community?
Yeah, so the membership, a lot of people ask, so how is that different from the Facebook group? The membership community is so much more of a holistic way of supporting our women in their move. So, of course, like a Facebook group, we have a chat in there, but we do so much more than that. So, we have weekly calls. So, calls with guest experts, anything from talking about visas to helping people find remote jobs to understanding, how to move abroad with pets. Speaking of remote jobs, we have actually recruiters from work from anywhere companies come join us. So our members get FaceTime with decision makers
Nice.
because I would say, well, not everyone in our community needs to solve that work challenge. I would say most of the women in our community, that's one of their biggest blockers to moving abroad. So in the lounge, it's called the Refreshers Lounge. We're there to help you with the biggest blockers. So that we have self-paced course, we have a remote job board, and a lot of other ways that we support our women from the start until they get abroad. And now we've had the Refreshers Lounge. It's still somewhat new. We've had it for a little over a year, but now we've had women who have made their move that are in the lounge, and they are still with us there. So now we're looking at how we can serve the women who have also made their move because that's a whole nother set of challenges that you're dealing with. It doesn't just end right when you make your move.
Yeah, that was a big thing. A question I had for you is like, how do you find your community once you're, if someone's thinking of moving abroad and really, like me, as an introvert and is kind of nervous about that, like,
Yeah.
what are your tips for finding community in your new location?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I think, one thing that people maybe aren't aware of is that you can start building community before you even move. So you don't even have to wait till you're on the plane and in your target destination. Now with all these online communities, you can find your people beforehand and you can do it virtually. So maybe for introverts, as you mentioned, it's not so nerve-wracking because you can, just chat with people in the comments, right? So I would say some great places to look. I know people aren't so much a fan of Facebook anymore, but Facebook groups are so invaluable. Not just mine. We mentioned She Here Refresh, but there's so many Facebook groups for expats. Let's say if you want to move to Paris, so expats in Paris, or if you're a woman, there's a lot of women-based groups. So Girl Gone International is a great resource to tap into. They have chapters all over the world. So you can find, the Berlin Girl Gone International Facebook group. Um, and then I would say, once you get somewhere, you've already built sort of some connections online virtually, but once you move, you really have to make an effort to make friends because they're not going to happen on their own. And I know that can be intimidating for a lot of people, but some things you can do is connect with those people that you met virtually before, but also go to meetups and I like to tell people, you just kind of have to say yes in the beginning when you want to make friends and build community, even when you don't feel like it. And I know for introverts, I call myself an ambivert, so sometimes I feel very extroverted and it's easy for me to get out there and be social, and sometimes it can feel like a big drag. So I think, if it is challenging for you to make an effort to go out, I would say just schedule it in like even once a month or once every other week, just to go to an event or a meetup, with like-minded people and just go for a little bit. And then give yourself, like 2, 3 days to recover, right? Recovery time, build that in. But just, I think it's important to make sure that you're being social and do it in a way that works for you. Maybe a meetup doesn't work for you because that's too many people and that's too overwhelming. So just book a coffee date with one of the people that maybe you met virtually.
Yeah, I think that's so wonderful. And I love the idea of building community before you even get there. And I think in today's world, that's such a great, you overlook that. Like when you say that, it seems so obvious, but,
Yeah.
it's so simple. What are the main reasons that people are looking to move abroad these days that you
Yeah.
hear in your?
Well, I think yeah, there's a lot of, so the main reason, I mean, when we're recording this, it's after the US election. I don't want to get into politics too much, but I will say right now, a lot of women in the US are feeling a push to make this move quicker than maybe they had planned. So I think with a lot of uncertainty happening in the US, I think that is motivating a lot of people to move. But outside of that, I think, all around the world, there's rising cost of living. But for people in the US, there's a lot of countries out there where you can lower your cost of living. So that's another reason why I'm seeing a lot of people are moving. They just can't afford to really comfortably pay their bills. And so they're looking for an alternative to that. And I think a lot of people just don't feel in alignment with where they're at, with the culture of where they're at. So whether that's your city, state, or the country, and so they're looking for a place that better suits their needs. And I know for me, that was very much true 10 years ago. Like, I just did not buy into this rat race, keeping up with the Joneses, climbing the corporate ladder. That just was not me. And I always felt so out of place in the US because we're so conditioned to follow that path. Like, that is the path of success. Those are markers of success. And so, moving to Spain really allowed me to be in a country where there isn't so much pressure to climb that ladder, and people aren't so much defined by the work they do. I mean, people are really just trying to enjoy life. Of course, they work, and they need to do that to pay their bills, but work isn't everything. And for me, Spain, made sense for me to make that move to a country that was more in alignment with how I wanted to live my life.
So many questions that came out of that. With the recent uptick in interest in moving abroad, how does someone who is feeling that decipher whether that's kind of a fear-based reaction versus a true desire to move? How would you kind of pick that apart for somebody?
Oh, I haven't been asked this before. Yeah, that's an important question for people to ask themselves because I think if we're making a fear-based decision, those you can make some not irrational decisions, but some decisions that maybe just haven't been thought through. You maybe just be doing things on a whim. And when you move abroad, you really don't want to move abroad on a whim because there are so many factors involved to set yourself up for success. And if you really don't evaluate each of those factors, you may find yourself moving abroad and then boomeranging back because you didn't prepare enough. So I think one, give yourself some time to really sit with those feelings and see if it's something that's fleeting or something that really really in your gut you feel like you want to do. I think for a lot of people out there, this is something they've been thinking about for a long time, and so maybe this uptick right now is just like accelerating their need to want to do that. Yeah. But something else I would tell people to do is to take a scouting trip, because if you are just running on feelings, and I tell people make decisions moving abroad based on facts, not just feelings. So you really want to, I guess I should back that up. Before the scouting trip, you want to do your homework too. So if you feel like you want to do this, start looking, at the places that you're interested in, and, run some numbers, crunch the numbers on cost of living. Can you even afford to live there? Is there a visa for you to be able to live there, to move there? Just because you want to move to the UK doesn't mean you can. It's actually really, really hard for Americans to move to the UK. So you have to do some kind of research based and come to some conclusions based on facts. But then I would also say to take time to take a scouting trip abroad. And a scouting trip is really just a test drive for the place that you want to move to, where you go to your target destination and stay for as long as you can, while your visa allows you. So if you can only stay a week or two, then you do that. But if you can stay the 3 months that Americans get in a lot of countries, do that as well to really feel it out and see if this meets the expectations that you had. Because again, you don't want to make a decision on a whim, because I have seen it happen over and over. People who so excited made the move, but didn't prep enough and found themselves having to move back home.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I have that on my list of questions to ask you about, in particular scouting trips and even just kind of doing test drives, right? And finding ways, but to do it in a different way and that's affordable. And I see you on your Instagram account a lot of times talking about different kind of alternative ways to do that. One being home exchange and the other being trusted house sitters and going and staying in people's houses and taking care of their pets. And I'm like one of the OG people that did home exchange when, 20 something years ago.
Wow.
Friends of ours were teachers. My husband's a teacher, and they were talking about going to Sweden for the summer during their break and swapping homes with another, couple and family who were from Sweden who were also teachers. And they literally had this old school book of like a list of all these teachers' resources, and you would either write to them or call them on the phone. I mean, like, this is old school. This is internet existed, but I was like, well, that's brilliant. But also is there a service for this? And it was like my ideas, my business hat was on. I was like, okay, if this doesn't exist, then I'm going to create it. I ended up finding homeexchange.com, and 6 months later ended up going on a home exchange trip. So do you want to tell people a little bit about your experiences with those things, and how people can really find creative ways to live, not just travel, but live in another place and feel like it and make it feel like it's home?
Yeah, that is so cool. I did not know that you're OG, yeah, home exchanger. So definitely, yes, there are ways to do this affordably. I think most people, think about Airbnb, and that's going to be one, very expensive, and two, depending where you're at, a lot of places in the world, Airbnb is really hurting locals. And so I think if you can find alternative ways, that's probably the better way to go. So house swapping or home exchanging is, for me, it's a top way. So this is where you are, like a lot of people think about the movie The Holiday, where you are exchanging homes at the same time, but it doesn't always have to be at the same time. There are different ways you can do this. But it's a very cost effective way to do it because you only pay the fee for the platform, which I don't know, it's like $220 a year, and you're not paying for each exchange for those who don't know how this works. And so it's a great way if you have a home, you don't have to be a homeowner. So even if you have an apartment, but check with your landlord to see if you can do this. It's a great way for you to have an extended stay abroad without having to really pay twice, right? Like pay your mortgage and then pay for accommodation abroad or pay your rent. So that's one way to do it. And I've been doing that for about almost 3 years now. I've done, I think, close to 50 swaps in about 10 different countries. And it really is my main mode of travel now when it comes to accommodation because it's just great to, one, stay in someone's home because that's so much cozier than staying in these sterile Airbnbs now. They're like IKEA furniture and not made for people who are living there. Also, I work and, I work when I'm on the road. And so a lot of times people have home offices, which is great to just be able to plug in when you get somewhere. And I just love the community aspect of something like a home exchange. So that's an option there. You had talked about house sitting. So that's definitely an option for people who are interested in staying in someone's home, again, without having to pay for accommodation and just taking care of someone's pets or plants. So if you're a pet lover, or you have a green thumb, that's a great way to do it as well. And some other ways to do it is, there's a Facebook group called Host a Sister. So that's where you can stay with somebody, stay in their home. I guess it's a little bit like couch surfing back in the day, but you don't have to stay in someone's couch. A lot of time people have bedrooms. So there are ways you can do that. And another site that a lot of my members of the lounge love and that I learned about from them is called Sabbatical. I think it's called Sabbatical Homes. Now I'm like doubting myself, but Sabbatical Homes, which was originally for academics who were maybe going to different universities to teach and they were staying and they needed housing while they were there. But now you don't have to be in academia to tap into sabbatical homes. So it's another way to stay in someone's house and kind of like be off the Airbnb grid there.
Nice. I wasn't aware of that option, so I'm gonna have to write that down, and I'll put all that information in the show notes too for anybody who wants to follow up on that. So once someone has basically determined, okay, yes, I want to move here, what are the next steps that they should take?
Yeah, so if they determine they want to move somewhere and they've done that research, like I said, cost of living, visas, and even connected with other people who have moved there to really pick their brain about it. I think then you need to devise your exit strategy, right? You need to understand what is the timeline that you're working with. Like, are you trying to move in the next 3 to 6 months? Is it more a year or two? Because then once you have your target move date, then you can reverse engineer all of the things you need to do before you go because there's a lot that you have to do. So I think that's the first thing is really getting clarity on when this trip is happening and if you have all the information to make it happen. Again, going back to community, I would really tap into community because you can talk to people who've been in your shoes before and they can help you see if there's any gaps in your plan there. When you can ask them, in these groups, like, what do I need to think about when moving abroad? Obviously, in the Refreshers Lounge, we are helping people through every step. So we do help people with all of these steps. So maybe finding a program that you can join if you feel like you need extra support. And then I think, yeah, just reaching out to the right people to help you with that. So I think a lot of people, want to know, do I need to work with an immigration lawyer? Can I do the visa on my own? So finding out for the visa you're applying for what feels best for you. A lot of visas, you don't need external support. You can do it yourself. But there's a lot of people who maybe don't feel confident about that and wants to work with someone. So then you need to start vetting who is the right lawyer for you. Same with housing. Do you want to find housing on your own? And I'll tell you the truth, in a lot of places around the world, it's like the Hunger Games, trying to find housing. It's a lot of competition. So do you want to work with a real estate agent? So then you need to do a vetting process of finding the right one for you. So those are things that I think people need to start looking at, when feel like they're ready to start moving forward. But then again, there's all these tasks you need to do, everything from downsizing and decluttering your home to figuring out if there's any special medications you need to take with you, or if you're moving with pets. So I think just finding a way to maybe get a hold of a list that really outlines these things for you can be really helpful when you're trying to make your move.
Mm. What are some of the places that you see with your refreshers are the most common choices for moving abroad, or the most accessible places to be moving right now?
Yeah. I think Spain and Portugal have been on the top, and they still are. I think a lot of people want to move there, one, because the weather is attractive, warm weather, although Portugal does have cold, wet winters in some areas, so something for people to be aware of. So good weather, I would say, very affordable if you're coming from the US or Canada. And then also the visas. Why so many people are coming here is because there's so many visas that make it accessible. Whether you're looking to buy property, Portugal doesn't have the golden visa anymore, and Spain is phasing it out. So that won't be an option anymore. But if you're looking to retire, if you're looking to work remotely, there's a lot of options there. But another option that I like to bring up that I think a lot of people are not aware of is Albania. And maybe people are thinking like, whoa, okay, we went from Spain and Portugal now to Albania. Where is that even? So Albania is a interesting option, I think, for Americans specifically, because you don't need a visa to move there, which means you literally can hop on a plane tonight and start living in Albania tomorrow without having to get a visa and go through any kind of bureaucratic process to get there. And so in addition to that, I think that's very attractive. It's a very affordable country right now. Um, it's very welcoming to Americans. A lot of Americans want to find community, so they're moving to the capital, Tirana. And I would say, a lot of people, especially under 40, speak English. So I feel like it's kind of an easy move. It's definitely not a place that's for everybody. It's not Spain and Portugal. It's a country that's still, I would say, emerging, developing in many ways. But it could be an option for people who are looking for like a transition country, a country maybe they just want to get out of the US. They can go there and kind of figure out what's next.
Yeah, I saw that a couple of months you spent some time there and actually met up with some people there. So, um, tell me a little bit about your impressions about it, and what would you, if someone says, "Ooh, I didn't realize that was an option, and I want to pursue that," like what would you suggest for them?
Yeah, I went last September for about 3 to 4 weeks, and I wanted to check it out because I do talk about Albania, but I wanted to have personal insights from my own experience there. And as you said, meeting with members of mine who have moved there, but also just meeting with different Americans and foreigners who moved there. See why are they moving there, other than that you don't need a visa and it's very economical. So I spent most of my time in Tirana, as I mentioned, where most people are moving. And I would say my first impressions of Tirana, the capital city, it's not a beautiful city. I guess I'll just say it bluntly like that. It's not, if you're romanticizing this life in Europe and you're thinking of Paris or Venice or Rome, it is not that, right? So I wouldn't say it's the most beautiful city, but it is a city that's very easy to be in. It's a very walkable city. And what really surprised me, it was so easy to build community there. And just the 3 weeks I was there, my social calendar was so filled up with events and meeting women like me. I mean, I'm 44, so it was great to meet women who were around my age, maybe a little bit younger, a little bit older. And I feel like my social calendar was so much more full there than it has been here in Malaga, Spain, where I live. So those are some pluses for me there. But in talking to people who have lived there, I think for a lot of Americans who move there, it's not a long-term plan. They are there for anywhere from a year to 4 years. Again, like I mentioned, kind of a in-between place, a soft landing to figure out, their next steps in Europe, where they want to move to. Some people, were there because they were maybe transitioning from being an employee to starting a business or freelancing, and they just needed somewhere inexpensive to be while they're building their business, so that they then could qualify for a digital nomad visa in maybe their dream country, like a Spain or Portugal. So I noticed that it's not a long-term place, but it's an easy place to be in the interim. I will say though, in terms of beauty, while the capital isn't the most beautiful, city in Europe, Albania's nature is so beautiful. They have beautiful beaches that are sometimes referred to as the Maldives of Europe, and just a lot of mountainous area, green area. So if you're into nature, there's a lot to do outside of the capital city.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so besides kind of those three, what are some other um, more accessible countries? Not even necessarily in Europe. I don't know if, I mean, the refreshers probably are looking worldwide, I would imagine, not just in Europe. I know that's probably your specialty, but what are some other accessible countries that might be kind of not on someone's radar?
Yeah. I mostly work with Europe, so I will mention maybe one or two more, and then I can talk about some other places. So I would say the Netherlands is another one, just because they have a visa that's specific for Americans called the DAFT visa. So if you're a freelancer, entrepreneur, business owner, it's a pretty easy visa to get to move there, and you don't need to have an existing business. This can be like a business idea, or you're starting your freelance business. So that's a way to move to Europe. And then Germany just launched something called an opportunity card. And it's kind of like a job seeker's visa. So you can go to Germany for a year if you get this visa, and you can look for work. And then if you find a company who wants to hire you, you can, modify your visa. You can get a work visa from Germany. You don't have to come back to the US. So that's really cool because Germany has a labor shortage in some industries. And so that's a way where you could, find work in a country in Europe and don't have to bring a remote job with you.
Interesting. Okay, I wasn't aware
Yeah.
of that.
I'm not as well versed in Central and South America, but I know that Mexico is a very popular place for people. I mean, we have a refresher who just moved there a few weeks ago. So that's a pretty easy country to move to, very affordable. And also why people like Mexico, it's the same time zones as the US. So if you're working remotely, that's great to just be in the same time zone and be so close if you need to be close to home for some reason, if you're taking care of elderly parents or you just want to be close to home or medical issues or you have doctors you need to see, I think that can just be an easy move for a lot of people. And then Colombia is popular as well in South America. Very warm culture. I'm half Colombian, so warm people, very affordable. So that could be an option as well.
Did you ever consider Colombia?
Not to live long term. For me, I never really considered Latin America to live long term, but I would like to spend time there. So I would love to do like a year in Colombia or maybe, a year or two in Mexico. But to live, I think I'm just more interested in Europe and for long term living. And I also would love to have like I don't know, be somewhere in Asia for a year or two.
Okay. Can you share some interesting success stories that you've come across with your clients and your refreshers that might stand out?
Yes. Oh, there's so many, but one of my favorites is a new one. And this is with Denise, who was actually featured in USA Today sharing her story. Denise, I met, she joined my masterclass last June. And then she joined the Refreshers Lounge shortly after. And then she ended up moving to the Netherlands 5 months later. It was like the fastest move I have seen from someone who was so determined. And what I love about Denise's story is she moved in her 50s. She made this move in her 50s, but she had been dreaming of moving abroad since she was a teenager. She did a stint in high school abroad and just, plant that seed was planted that she wanted to live abroad one day. But, life happened. She got married. She was raising children. She had a career. And recently she was laid off and her children are now grown up. She's divorced and she really thought like I can make this happen now. So it was just so incredible to see her come into the master class, thinking she was maybe going to be able to move to Italy if she could get the Italian citizenship through ancestry, but that was a long shot. And then in the master class, she learned about the DAFT visa for the Netherlands and then just like put it to action and made it happen 5 months later. So that was one of my favorite stories. Um, so many. Another story is of a woman named Cindy who similarly, she, well, also in her 50s, we work with women of all ages, but these two stories stand out, is Cindy had four grown children, divorced, and I believe it was at 57, she started traveling the world on her own. So solo travel for a few years. And she recently got her Italian citizenship through descent and has moved to Sicily. So she's gone from like traveling full time to now living in Sicily, but still very much has the travel bug and is on some travels right now. So very incredible to see these women who have radically changed their lives in ways that maybe, yeah, they didn't even realize that they were going to do, right?
Yeah, yeah. And are you, so I guess let's talk about it. You've also recently rebooted the She Hit Refresh podcast. So, and you're bringing stories like these to life and sharing, success stories. And so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so actually, the two women I just mentioned, they were on the podcast. So if anyone wants to hear them tell their own stories, definitely check it out. So we have a podcast called the She Hit Refresh podcast, and I actually had this podcast from 2019 to 2022, I believe. And we paused the podcast back then and just been on hiatus just because, as you know, a podcast takes a lot of time and resources. But it was a podcast, and it is a podcast to share the stories of women, 30 and above, in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, who have made the move abroad and are thriving abroad. And they share how they did it. They talk about the challenges. We don't just talk about how amazing their lives are. We talk about, what are some of the challenges they face, if they've had doubts, what they would have done different. And so highlighting their moves and also giving people, tangible information. We talk about visas and what are the requirements for certain visas. We talk about, looking for housing. We talk about dating, all of the things. And we just brought the podcast back this year. So definitely tune in. We have a lot of incredible stories that we're sharing on the pod.
Yeah, I've listened to a few episodes so far, and again, I am a big proponent of kind of showing by example, right? And I love that. That's why I wanted to bring this podcast forward too, is to really give inspiration to people who are thinking about it and planting that seed, but just haven't quite got out of that armchair yet. So I think, and so that is another great resource for people, especially women who, might be taking on this idea on their own, or, at in their 50s or whatever. Like, it can be done. And here are some examples. And I think that's such a powerful testament. So
Definitely. I mean, I meet so many people around the world through She Hit Refresh that remember those stories and tell me also that the podcast is what, kept them motivated and gave them the inspiration to really stick to their dream and make their own move happen. So sharing these stories is so powerful. So you're going to be hearing people coming back to you and telling you, oh my God, that podcast episode with so and so, it really helped me XYZ. It's really powerful.
yeah, I hope so. That's the hope. Um, What do you see as the most common thing holding someone back from moving abroad? Like, what is that limiting belief, or what are the limiting beliefs that are holding them back from making the move?
Yeah, I think for what I see, with a lot of the women I work with, and this is why I started She Can Refresh, is that limiting belief of age, that we're too old to do this or it's too late to do this. Because we just, at a certain age, you have built a life, so you have a lot of tethers. Really, that's what I think they're afraid of, is walking away from something that they put so much time in, whether that's your career, you have a house with mortgage, you have a community and friends, your family. And so people are afraid to leave what they know for the unknown. And that's something that's so much easier when you're 20 and fresh out of college. You're not really thinking about that. And so I think people just feel like that this could be a precarious, thing to do. And so I think that's why it's so important to share these stories, that, you can make a move abroad in a responsible way. You're definitely not too old, because there's women of all ages doing this. So age is a big one. I think another one, people, their limiting belief, or I guess their fear, is like they don't know if it's the right decision.
Mm.
And this is such an interesting one, because I think people don't like the answer I give them when they're like, how do I know if this is the right decision? Well, you don't. You can't know until you do it, right? Like, I can't tell you if it's the right decision for you, and you won't 100% know until you do it. So going back to what I said, like, yes, you can plan and make sure you set yourself up for success, but a lot of things in life, we just don't know until we actually go through the motions. And so I think people just have that fear. I guess that would be a fear of failure or making a mistake.
Sure.
And so that's something I tell people, again, you won't know until you do it. But sometimes when we have these fears, if you really know you want to do this, you're going to feel the fear. I felt the fear even with my move, and I was sure I want to do this. So a lot of times we just have to learn how to feel the fear and do it anyways, right? Like, don't do it on a whim. Go with your plan, but you're still going to feel fear when you make that leap abroad. And even when you're abroad, you're still going to be doubting or feeling fear about that.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. I had that question, is what if it doesn't work? Right? What if it doesn't work?
yes.
And what do you tell people, and how do you address that?
Yeah, that's the question. I think, yeah, with the common fears, like, what if it doesn't work out? How to know if this is the right decision? Am I too old? Yeah, will I be lonely? I hear that a lot from people. Am I going to feel alone? And yeah, I mean, the truth is, yes, you will feel lonely at times. because, you can feel lonely in your home city, right? We can feel lonely anywhere. But I think you'd be surprised at how easy it is to meet people when you move, because you're going to meet so many people just like you who made this move and are looking to make friends. So I think actually making friends is not too hard. I think the challenge is finding your people, right? Like finding your ride or dies, but making acquaintances and finding people, that's not a challenge. So I would tell people, don't worry too much about that fear. You're going to make friends.
What's coming up next for you and for She Hit Refresh? Like, what's on the horizon? Because you've had such explosive growth in the last couple of months, and I congratulate you. And I know we've kind of chatted a little bit. You're like, yeah, this has been a lot of years in the making, and it's really kind of showing now. So what's next for you?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, a 7-year overnight success story, right? So what's next for us? Well, I definitely am going to do another master class. I've been mentioning this master class. Our last one, we had about 600, almost 650 women join, which was a huge spike. Before that, we've had about 90, 100. So we're going to be running it again. I do run it periodically. So the next master class I'm gearing up for is going to be in April, the end of April. And so just working on how to make that even better. So I'm excited for that. And really, that's my main focus for the year. And also, I guess I'll say, we also will be opening the doors to the Refreshers Lounge again, also in April. So those are two things, like from a business standpoint of how we can serve people. That's what's going on with She Hit Refresh. And then also, I'm gearing up for some speaking events that I'm excited for in the US. So one will be, I'll be talking about actually how I built my masterclass. And then another one, I'm going to be at the Move Abroad Con in San Antonio, talking about moving abroad. So I'm really excited about that as well.
Congratulations. That's so fun.
Thank you.
If anybody wants to find you, where do they look? I mean, I know you're all over Instagram with She Hit Refresh. What's your Facebook group? Like, where can people reach out and work with you or find you or join your community?
Yes, thank you so much for letting me share. Yeah, if anybody wants to connect, I would say join our free Facebook group. So that's, Facebook groups /groups/ She Hit Refresh. Instagram as well, where it's She Hit Refresh. Our website has a lot of great resources. So that's also She Hit Refresh. And then YouTube as well. So we're back on YouTube. So check us out there as well.
Great. Super. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your story and inspiring not only me, but I know many others. It's been such a pleasure talking to you, and you're such a light. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Shannon. It has been so much fun being on here with you. So thank you again for having me.
And that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening and spending some time with us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Make sure to follow the show and leave a review. It will really help others find us. And if you're dreaming about a life abroad or already living it, I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me on Instagram at bargainhomesabroad or on our website, www.bargainhomesabroad.co. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and I'll see you back in the armchair soon. Bye-bye.